The King and the Magician. Once upon a time, there lived a rather strange king named King Feroz Khan. He had one great weakness. He loved trying new and impossible things. Sometimes he would command, "Make it rain gold for me." And sometimes, "Bring me food that jumps straight into my mouth." His poor minister, Abdullah, was always troubled by these strange demands. One day, a magician arrived at the royal court. He wore a colorful turban, held a sparkling staff in his hand, and had a mischievous smile on his lips. He bowed and said, "Greetings to the great king. I am a magician who can make anything possible, be it a flying horse or a talking melon." The king's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Really? If you can perform a miracle, I'll reward you with your weight in gold." The magician replied proudly, "Just give the command, Your Majesty." The king thought for a moment and said, "Make my minister Abdullah stop talking. He talks far too much." The whole court burst into laughter. The minister smiled politely and said, "Your Majesty, if I don't speak, who will tell you what's wise and what's foolish?" The king laughed loudly. "Exactly. Let's see if the magician can silence you." The magician twirled his staff, muttered a few mysterious words, and a flash of glittering smoke filled the air. Suddenly, the minister's voice disappeared. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. The court clapped and cheered. The king was so delighted he began to dance. Amazing! This magician is truly a gem. But soon things took a strange turn. The king suddenly felt thirsty. He said, "Bring me water." But since the minister couldn't speak to clarify his order, the servants thought the king was joking. No one brought water. Later, when the king ordered food, the cooks got confused again. No one understood what he really wanted. Chaos spread through the palace. The minister tried to write something, but his hands trembled, and the king's face turned red with anger. Finally, the king shouted, "Magician! Undo this spell right now." The magician calmly said, "Your Majesty, there's only one way to break this spell." The king frowned. "And what is that?" The magician smirked. "You must remain silent for one whole day. If you speak even a single word, your minister will stay mute forever." The king's jaw dropped. "What? Me, the king, stay silent for an entire day? Impossible." The minister wanted to laugh, but he couldn't make a sound. His face, however, said everything. At last, the king sighed in defeat. "Fine, I'll stay silent for one day." The magician waved his staff again. "Remember, Your Majesty, one word, and the spell is permanent." Now the real fun began. The next morning, the king woke up. His servant asked, "Your Majesty, what would you like for breakfast?" The king couldn't answer. He tried using hand gestures. The servant thought he wanted fish, but the king actually wanted eggs. So breakfast arrived with fish, and the king angrily threw the fish tail at the minister, who was still silent. At noon, the minister tried signaling for lunch to be served properly. But the cook misunderstood and spilled soup all over the king's bed. The king's face turned red like a tomato, but he couldn't say a word. By evening, his patience had completely run out. He gestured to the minister, meaning, "Write it down. I'm going to speak." The minister folded his hands, begging him silently to wait. But the king couldn't take it anymore. He shouted, "Enough! I'm the king. I will not stay quiet." The moment he spoke, the magician appeared again, laughing loudly. "Ha ha ha ha, I knew it. Kings can never stay silent." He said mockingly, "Since you broke your promise, your minister shall remain mute forever." The king panicked. "Please, O magician, have mercy. I'll give you as much gold as you want." The magician thought for a moment, then smiled slyly. "All right, one last test. If your minister can make you laugh, I'll break the spell." The minister, still unable to speak, slowly walked up to the king. He pulled a small mirror from his pocket and held it up in front of the king's face. The king looked and saw himself covered in soup stains, hair all messy, and a mosquito sitting right on his nose. The entire court burst out laughing. And soon the king couldn't help but laugh too. The magician clapped his hands, laughing loudly. Ha ha, that's the real magic. Laughter is the greatest spell of all. And with that, he disappeared into thin air. The minister's voice returned instantly. The king hugged him and said, "My friend, you are my true wisdom. I talk too much and listen too little. But today I've learned that silence is sometimes the greatest wisdom." The minister smiled and replied, "And sometimes laughter is the greatest magic." Moral of the story: the world doesn't run on magic. It runs on wisdom, patience, and laughter. Sometimes silence is the best answer, and a sincere smile is the one magic that can heal any sorrow.